So welcome everybody to Startup Grind Chilliwack. So Startup Grind is a global movement. They now have more than 600 chapters all over the world, every country you could possibly imagine. And it's really three core things: educate, inspire, and connect. And there's three things. It's all about making friends, not contacts. Give first, don't take, and help others. And so keep that in mind as you're networking and meeting others. You may end up doing business together. You might end up forming partnerships. Who knows? We have had some wonderful sponsors for this year. Our gold sponsors include the Chilliwack Economic Partners and Accelerator. Let's hear it for those folks. And at the silver level, UFE's been involved. Thank you, UFE. Our partners, those are the folks that are helping with the day-to-day getting this thing going, and that includes Cowork Chilliwack, Currency Marketing, Wisebox, and Around Chilliwack for promotion and photography. Let's hear it for those guys. There's something special coming up. It's the 10th anniversary of Startup Grind Global. I went last year as a director, the first time, to get a real taste for what this is all about. It's in Redwood City, just south of the SFO airport. And it's quite affordable. So I've got a little bit of a promo video here. If you look closely, you may just spot me in it.
Credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena. Whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause. At best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement. And if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.
So what I would love to do is collect a bunch of Chilliwack folks and head there. I took a look at what the pricing is, and I've been to something called South by Southwest a number of times, and that's astronomical for cost. But if we were to do this, we could grab an Airbnb for 10 people, say, and split that amongst ourselves, and you'd be looking about $1,000 US. So keep that in mind if this is something. I found it high value, especially from just learning from startups that have been through the trenches and the startup grind and so forth, and just the opportunity to mingle in the demo area. And they do have startups from all over the world actually compete to be on stage, and there's ultimately a new startup crowned as a winner, as well as a legacy that's doing a new product, and it was really good. So if you are interested in that, reach out to me and maybe we can do that. I'll be going again as a director, so but I would love to represent Chilliwack. There was actually a group from Jordan and another one from Georgia, not near Alabama, but near Russia, and they brought 40 people. It was incredible, yeah. And it's a quite affordable tech conference, so keep that in mind. If you are covering this at all with photos and posting, use the hashtag StartupGrind. And we'll get down to business here. our guest tonight is Kalvin Morrow. You likely know Kalvin, but you don't know his whole story. The CEO of Greenhouse Games. Let's give a warm startup Grind Chilliwack welcome to Kalvin. Woo! Oh, you know what? I'm going to put you there. Okay. That's a better spot for the video. You don't need to see me.
Hello.
Yes. So with these, I've kind of gone through the history of folks, but I want to condense that this time because you've had a tremendous amount of learning, especially in the last, say, half year, of getting some traction and funding. And so we're going to burn through the preamble, but it's really interesting where you've been and where you've come from. You were educated in Chilliwack.
Yeah.
And you started your career, what I understand, as a civil and architectural designer.
Yes, Omega Engineering downtown. My first education out of high school was going to Career Technical Center, which is part of UFE in Abbotsford, and that was my first life.
And so you quickly realized that this is not the life for me.
Yeah, I wanted to find a career that was based on how good you are at it, your passion in the industry, and I found that that one particular was more about how long you've been doing it and how many years of university you've done. So I went back to Vancouver Film School and started my career in games.
So I guess that's quite a jump, but I guess some of it's applicable. What did you take from engineering and architectural design that applied in game design?
So I went from designing houses and septic fields and roads to level designing games. So I was designing houses and roads. It's just there's Spider-Man jumping around in it. So there was a lot of overlap, really, going from AutoCAD into 3D, 3ds Max, and yeah, surprisingly a lot of overlap.
Did you ever hide a septic field in any of your games?
No.
No? There's still time.
I've never thought about that, but that's a great idea,
Awesome.
I think.
Well, Vancouver Film School, it's world-renowned for film, obviously, and game design, but it was very early in the game program, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was in the second class, so 4 months behind the first class.
You revealed to me that you do not draw, and it's been something that people have pointed out. What does a game designer do?
So a game designer is similar to a director in movies. We come up with the concept of the game, we come up with the blueprints of the game. Generally, depending on your business model, we figure out how the game's going to make money. There's lots of different specializations. Some people are more story-driven, some people are more art-driven, which I am not. I'm more economy-driven, monetization, how to make money-driven, and the general concept itself. But again, there's no set, like this is what a game designer does. It all depends on the team you work with and how to compensate for the skills that are needed in the team you're working with.
So you're here to tell me that those endless hours that my son is wasting on video games actually potentially have a career path.
Yeah, I spent my whole childhood being told that my brain was going to rot and that there was no benefits from playing games, and yet here I am today.
But that's the common refrain, isn't it? And where does that come from? Is it just misunderstanding, ignorance?
It's a misunderstanding. At the end of the day, games are problem solving. So if you're teaching a kid how to play a game, it's don't give up, keep trying, think about what you're trying to do and try to accomplish your goals. So I personally believe there's a lot of transitional value from being a stubborn young gamer into becoming a stubborn adult.
I guess to one aspect, it's not just consumption, it's actual interaction. What do you learn from endless lives?
Nothing.
I know, I'm just kidding. Just poking the bear.
If you think continually dying over and over again is a good positive thing, then I think you're missing a few key life lessons.
Got it. Well, you mentioned Vancouver Film School. You jumped ahead a little bit, which is great. The first thing on your resume out of there was Flying Squirrel Games, which still...
Next Level Games.
Yeah. But you also had, I guess Flying Squirrel has always been in the background as your own personal
Oh, okay.
brand almost.
Yeah, so my company as a student project when I was at Vancouver Film School was called Flying Squirrel Games.
Got it, okay.
And it just so happened that 15 years later, when I created my first game company, I went back to the well and it was called Flying Squirrel Games.
Okay, stop there, don't tell anymore. I just was wondering where that came from in the story, so.
Yeah.
But your first jump was with Next Level Games and Spider-Man, Friend or Foe.
Yeah.
Like that was straight in? Like when you graduate from Vancouver Film School, are you placed in some sort of practicum or are you just out there with your portfolio? And
Yeah, Vancouver Film School was 12 full months, so not a standard university or college program, and they teach you everything you need to know to interact with everybody on a game development team. So whether that's programming, design, audio, project management, motion capture, art related, anything, you can talk to anyone on the team about what they need to do, because as a game designer, we design the game. And if you're going to do that successfully, you need to understand the roles of the people that are helping you.
And I guess Vancouver Film School on your resume opens people's eyes, it's well respected, and I guess always, especially Vancouver, has been an epicenter for game development, so it's probably many jobs available.
Yeah. Well, basically how Vancouver Film School works is about, at least back when I went through it, maybe 20% of the instructors were full-time at Vancouver Film School, but 80% of them work in industry. So a lot of the people that taught me were from EA or Microsoft or Next Level Games, a lot of the companies in Vancouver, and the benefit for those companies by sending employees to come teach is that they get the first pick of the crop of students coming out. So that's the beneficial relationship that they have that works in the industry. That's the difference.
Got it. And so this game in particular, it was Xbox 360, Wii, PS2, and you were a level designer.
Yeah, I was the lead level designer for that game on my first game out of school, and our development team was about 75 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So thrown right into it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what I've gathered, especially looking at your career, is it's very Hollywood style in that you guys get together, you build a game, then it disbands, and you find a new gig or perhaps in the same company, but it's definitely jumping around, isn't it?
Yeah, well, games is a high-risk industry. It's really expensive to make games. It takes a lot of people to do it, and again, therefore, there's a lot of risk. So more often than not, people come together, they've got a great idea, they want to build a game. Maybe it does well, maybe it doesn't, but more often than not, you're often looking for another job at the end of it.
So from there, you landed at Human Nature Studios. Tell me about that place.
Yeah, so Human Nature was under the umbrella of Nexon Publishing. They're one of the initial corporations that basically invented the free-to-play business model out of Korea. So I worked for them as my second job after Next Level Games, and yeah, they specialized in free-to-play games, and that's what I've done ever since. So a free-to-play game is basically, instead of paying $60 for a console game up front, you don't have to pay for the game, but you pay for items within the game.
Got it.
Yeah.
And that really opened up when we got to the mobile area with iOS and Android and so forth.
Yeah.
Because previously it would be online, right? Like
Yeah.
Essentially in a website.
Yeah, the standard mobile business model now is free to play, which again is the same type of business model I worked on at Nexon about, what was it, about 13 years ago now? 12 years ago?
Right.
Yeah.
Next was Bardell Entertainment. And this was more on the animation side, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. So Bardell Entertainment, they've been around for probably about 30 years now. They're traditionally a film animation production studio, and they were trying to make a game at the time, if I remember correctly, it was called Toki World, which is a game for kids, a massively multiplayer online game for kids, where they were taught about sustainability, recycling, and those types of efforts.
Thrilling.
Yeah, it was.
Just kidding. And so, yeah, you were the lead designer taking this concept. Did that get to market?
No, unfortunately, the studio didn't have enough funding to get the game to market, so I was only there for about 10 months, we led the team, we developed the game, got it ready to go into the marketplace, but then they didn't have the ability to execute on the go-to-market strategy.
Got it. And was that in Vancouver still?
Yeah.
Okay. And next one is Inspirato Games.
Mm-hmm.
And they were acquired by PopCap. What's PopCap?
PopCap was a company that was acquired by Electronic Arts. So we were developing a brain training game, a browser-based Flash game, and eventually the team was acquired by PopCap, which was acquired by EA. So it was a successful exit, even though none of us made money. But all the investors were paid back, and the team then transitioned to be Electronic Arts employees.
Like, it sounds like the ground's always shifting underneath you, right? And
Constantly.
you're wondering, is the funding there? Have the big wigs got the venture capital or whatever it takes? And you probably always have your eye looking for the next opportunity. Or are you sort of in it and it just...
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. In a number of the opportunities I've had towards the end, you're looking for other jobs, or you're interviewing, or flying every weekend to San Francisco, or Toronto, or New York, or... but yeah, it's a volatile industry. Entertainment is risky, and there's not a lot of job stability unless you're with a studio that has high profitability, but even those studios have their own challenges.
And then you relocated to Kelowna, which is a bit of a game center unto itself, especially now, and you were working for Disney Online Studios.
Yes.
So is that as sexy as it sounds, or is it just a big bureaucracy?
Both.
Okay.
It was very sexy, but it was very bureaucratic. Basically, I was hired to work on a new Disney project that was supposed to be the first Disney Online theme park. That part of that goal was to connect all their other virtual worlds they had. They had Pixie Hollow and World of Cars and Pirates Online. So my job was to try to create a game on top of all of those other games. And long story short, we hit the technology curve where everything transitioned from Flash essentially into Unity, and all those other games were browser-based for the most part. So they pulled the plug on that, and then I ended up working on the Club Penguin game design team.
Got it. Yeah, I think I have a Club
Yeah.
Penguin. If any of us have kids, you're probably familiar with this. Describe what Club Penguin is.
Club Penguin was a browser-based, massively multiplayer online game for kids with the theme of penguins. So the whole world was about penguins walking around on icebergs. They had all kinds of fun games they would play. It was like a theme park full of penguins, really. I believe at their height they were making about $12 million a month, and we had upwards of 100,000 concurrent users at one time.
So describe what that revenue is. Is that little kids going to their parents and saying, "Mommy, I need a new bedspread for my for my virtual bedroom," or?
So at the time, that game wasn't free to play. It was a
Got it.
subscription model where kids paid between, depending on the time frame, $6 or $7 a month to be able to use their coins to be able to purchase different customization items within the game.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah.
Moving right ahead, somehow you go from Kelowna to Malta. Everybody know where Malta is? It's off the boot of Italy, from what I understand.
Yeah, just a little chunk that fell off.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Well, I was specialized in kids' virtual worlds at the time, and I got a phone call. They were building a big empire in Malta for a lot of really experienced game developers, and they wanted me to lead the design on... Basically, it was a property designed to teach kids about where the tooth fairy comes from and what happens to their teeth after they fall out of their face,
Okay.
to put it bluntly. Yeah, the company ran into some legal issues, which I had nothing to do with, but let's maybe leave that one
Sure,
there.
fair enough.
Again, risky, right?
Yeah.
Like you said.
Malta, what's the culture there?
Malta, interestingly enough, it's about 80 kilometers away from Sicily, although their bloodlines are more rooted in Arabic, so a lot of Turkish influence, a lot of Middle Eastern influence, again, even though they're in Europe. Malta seems to get conquered every time somebody's floating either into Europe to take over Europe or into the Middle East to take over the Middle East. That just seems to be the place to be in the middle, to stop.
How did they become like a tech game center?
Malta, I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe there's about 400,000 Maltese people on the planet, and over half of them had left. A lot of their natural resources were cut down or mined hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So about 15 or 20 years ago now, they determined their natural resource would be technology and programming. So they put a bunch of government incentives in place to attract different game development studios, gambling, online gambling, website development, and they just made it really attractive for companies to grow there. And I also hear it's a bit of a tax haven, which
Okay.
may have some benefits to people doing
Got
business.
it. And is it part of the Eurozone?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you as a Canadian, what sort of visa do you need to work there?
I don't really know. I got the job and I flew over there and I was surprised that no one asked me any questions at customs and I just showed up and
Okay.
started working.
Okay, fair enough. Let's just move on. This is being recorded.
I mean, it was done properly. It was
Okay.
just as a Canadian citizen going into the EU as a highly specialized job.
Right.
Clearly, no one in Malta was qualified to do what I do, so it was an easy play,
Got
I
it.
guess.
Okay.
But it was legal.
And you and one of your kids was born there.
Yeah, yeah. My oldest daughter, she's 7 now. She
Wow.
was born there.
And you were there, I think, a couple years, 2 to 3 years?
Just under 2 years.
And from there, you ended up in Colorado. Boulder, I believe it's another kind of game center cluster of tech and gaming companies.
Not a lot of gaming companies. I think there's 2, maybe 3, but they are a tech hub. You may hear a lot of people reference Boulder, the Boulder thesis in our tech community in Chilliwack here, but by no means is it a gaming hub.
So you were responsible for many hours lost by many people on a massive hit called Dragonville. You were the lead game designer.
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't part of the launch team, but they brought me in to give the product more legs, to increase its profitability, and to increase its life cycle. Dragonvale was the top grossing app in all app stores of 2012 and 2013. Hasbro acquired it for a 70% acquisition for $110 million.
Wow. And so the makeup, the most profitable, if it's a free-to-play game, what does that look like? Are 95% of the people playing for free, and then 5% are pouring their life savings into dragons?
Pretty close.
Okay.
The free-to-play model, about 90% of players, they don't pay anything. But
Okay.
they have social benefits. They can bring their friends, which has virality. But yeah, about 10% of the players pay money. The small percentage of players is under 1% that keeps the lights on. They're really large, what we call whales. So at the time when I left, our highest single paying player for Dragonvale was around $65,000 US. One person.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm clinging to this iOS family sharing thing that when my daughter wants to buy an in-game thing, I get an alert and I say no. It's all I have, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the good thing is that the app stores are very good. That if you as a parent have a complaint, more often than not, they'll just give you your money back.
Got it.
And they deal with all of that headache. But I encourage you to let your kids make as many purchases as possible.
As you would as the lead game designer. So in your time, again, was it with Hasbro at the time, or?
Yeah.
And how did that work? Was it still kind of an independent entrepreneurial spirit, or was it kind of corporate?
Well, the time I came in within months of the acquisition. So I was there when it transitioned to Hasbro. And there's always a big push when corporations come in. All of a sudden it was like, hey, can we put My Little Pony in there? That would be a great idea, right? And I'm like, unfortunately, if you do that, you're probably going to lose a lot of players, just like when I worked at Club Penguin and all of a sudden they wanted to put Mickey Mouse in there and the community revolted. Surprisingly or not, people want their game worlds to actually be the theme that they signed up for.
That's
Not
pretty fickle, isn't it? And you're at the whim of the community. And the shelf life, it seems like you can be at the top of the world and then it's done. So what, I imagine when you came in, not the original team, but part of it would be to extend the life of Dragon Vale, because it's still going, isn't it?
Yeah, it still does very well. I think it's still a top 200 or 300 grossing app at the time, even 5 or 6 years after I worked on it. But the things you get into are the technology curve. So like what happened with Club Penguin, there was a shift between browser-based, Flash-based gaming into mobile apps, and it never survived that transition. Luckily for Dragon Vale, I think it launched in about 2009 or 10, and it's still there today because the technology curve, we're still developing apps. That hasn't changed. So
Got
again, it depends when your product launches and what technology you're attached to.
Okay, so that's the past. We've walked through that. It's a pretty varied, exciting past. But now, all of a sudden, you're a startup founder, entrepreneur, and you're coming back to Chilliwack. What brought you back to Chilliwack?
Well, I'm from Chilliwack. I had young kids that had been away from all of my family, and as a Canadian citizen, there's a lot of benefits to creating a company in your home country. So I just figured at the time, come back, get close to family, spend more time with them, get the kids exposed to family life, and plot out onto this journey of creating my own company.
And that was Flying Squirrel Games at the time.
Yeah. The vision was at the time, I had a contract to do, Airside Andy, which again was another kids massively multiplayer game. So that allowed me to move back here, have some income for Flying Squirrel, while I created Greenhouse Games, which is my real eggs in the basket right now.
Got it. And Airside Andy, tell us about that.
Yeah, Airside Andy, again, is a kids massively multiplayer online game, similar to Club Penguin, but it's built in Unity, it's fully 3D. The idea behind it is that kids get to go into the world and they get to operate a fully functional airport. So they're working together to unload baggages and planes and keep the airport functioning. Again, all in a massively multiplayer online setting where they can see hundreds of other kids running around. So we developed the game over about 3 years. It's a pretty robust game. Our clients that own it are actually in the UK, and a lot of their funding initiatives kind of got messed up due to Brexit. They had a lot of their funding tied up in the British pounds, and then we know how that story went, and it's kind of been a nightmare. So far it's just been sitting there because they don't have the funds to get enough players into the game to make it profitable.
What would go into funding versus promotion and getting the word out? Like what percentage as far as like building the game and then taking it to market?
It all depends on the game, and it depends on your marketing opportunities. As a kids game, obviously, you're a lot more limited, especially being owned in Europe, because there's a lot of like Child's Online Protection Acts and different things out there that protects kids from marketing. So developing a kids game can actually be very expensive to market to them. And again, that's part of the challenge that happened with that app. Initially, they were planning on developing a full animated TV series, which they could funnel traffic from the TV series into the game. But again, due to Brexit, they were never able to fund that, which prevented us from having our, what we call a funnel of players into the game.
It's a constant challenge, isn't it? Like you've got so many balls in the air trying to do this, and yet you're just coming back and trying and
Yes, sir, can I have another?
exactly. Which brings us to your latest venture, Greenhouse Games.
Yeah. Greenhouse Games, basically the concept of that is we're doing free-to-play mobile city builder games. So if you've heard of games like Farmville or Heyday, things like that. Greenhouse Games, the idea is that we're doing themes that come from the greenhouse. So I did an assessment of the mobile marketplace to try to figure out what kind of opportunities are there in the marketplace, and I figured out cannabis theme at the time was actually illegal on the marketplace. It's now legal.
So I imagine this initial research phase is you kicking back in Colorado, the first state to legalize pot, and you're in your zone, you're taking this in, and it hits you. I can marry Dragonvale with marijuana. Is that basically how it went?
I can picture it. It's pretty much, yeah. Okay. Well, the things that interested me about the marijuana theme was just seeing the legalization process. And when you went to a dispensary, it wasn't your standard hippies and tie-dye. It was a high-end, highly profitable, really upscale business model that I thought would transition really well to the mobile marketplace, especially given at the time that it was illegal to make a marijuana-based game app. So outside of Canafarm, the idea is that we build the technology platform, which we have in place now. We've got Canafarm, which is live. You can download it now on Android, Google Play, Amazon. And then we're going to do a number of other games with similar themes. So Vino Valley, it's all about crafting different types of wine. Then we're going to do Hop Farm, which is all about different types of hops and beer, so the craft beer market. So really, it's about reusing our technology and our blueprints for our game and reusing it for themes that haven't been overly saturated in the marketplace.
Got it. And developing Canafarm, you reached back to some contacts in Malta, from what I understand, to do some of the art and programming, and so you had this long distance.
Yeah,
Like
so
lots of Skype calls, I imagine. And
the same team that developed Airside Andy actually developed Canafarm.
Okay.
So I was an owner of Flying Squirrel. I also started up Greenhouse Games, and Greenhouse Games contracted the development to Flying Squirrel Games in Malta.
And you've been toiling in Chilliwack with Greenhouse Games for a number of years, because to really get this to market and to really blow it up and promote it, you need funding.
Yeah.
And it's been challenging.
Yeah, very, very challenging.
When you first said, I'm going to come back to my hometown, did you expect it to be this difficult?
No, not at all. Initially, I was actually poised to go back into Kelowna, which there is some gaming market there, but all my family was down here, so I just decided to come down here. But it's been a huge, huge challenge, to say the least. I've raised very, very little money in Chilliwack.
And why is that? Is it an education thing, or is it just a comfort level? You're selling a bit of an abstract something or other that we're potentially not familiar with. And we hear about these Candy Crushes and so forth that explode and create billions of dollars in value, but it's hard to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah, so in Chilliwack I found, it's a technology startup, which is high risk, but when you talk to people about the revenue potential, it almost scares them off because they think that you're like kidding about how much money they can generate. And combine that with just a lot of the people I talk to in Chilliwack, they don't play games, especially free-to-play games. The whole business model is foreign to them. And I find a lot of the people in Chilliwack would just rather invest in something that they know a lot more about.
Got it.
And so that's really been the gap.
So over the course of the last year, you started to get, that's a screen capture from the game, which is really cool. I played it a little bit when you first had a demo out. So really, it's about the lessons learned in the last year that I want to dig in for the meat of this conversation, because you kind of had to leave Chilliwack and head for Vancouver.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so about last December, I realized that I had to branch out from my funding efforts. I had a number of challenges. People were giving me feedback that maybe I didn't have enough business experience, given the fact that most of my team was in Europe. That seemed really risky. So essentially what I did was cut ties with my European developer so I could line up different Canadian incentives. So there's a number of different things that tech startups do in order to ensure they've got funding and cash flow. And if your operations cash flow isn't 80% in Canada, then you don't get the investment benefits. So long story short, what I've done since December is we now have a new developer located in Burnaby. Their name is Pocket Pinata. Our leadership team now, we've got over 150 years experience working for EA, Microsoft, Hasbro, a lot of the big players in the industry, but this also allows me to get what's called an eligible business corporation, which is the investment side tax benefits that I need to continue to find investment. So now that 100% of my cash flow is in Canada and I've got a highly experienced development team. It's opened a lot of doors for me just over the last 2 or 3 months to bring on new additional investors.
And so approaching this other firm, without getting into too many details, are you working with them on a contract basis, or was there some sort of merger and equity swap? Or
Yeah, so we have a deal in place right now where we've got shared ownership of the studio. So they work on a lot of large name IPs, intellectual properties. I'm just trying to think of the ones that I can mention publicly. I probably should be careful with that, but they've got a lot of really well-known intellectual properties from Hollywood, TV shows, movie licenses, so that allows me to have less risk on my company because we have service work coming in. It allows me to get a salary, but at the same time, what they were looking for was they want to increase the valuation of their company, and the best way to do that is to own your own technology and intellectual property or games. So between us coming together, it reduces the risk on my end while it increases their upside valuation potential.
and you touch on something interesting there that's not necessarily available to a game development company. Many tech startups grow out of a service company, right? It might be a web development firm, and then they stumble upon a product idea and start pouring more of their energy in here, and then all of a sudden that starts taking off, and they can say, we'll shut down the custom web design element. With gaming, there's no minimal viable product. Like it's to a degree, it has to be polished. The first impression is huge.
Yeah, and that's always the case with, at least my understanding for tech startups is yes, you need a minimum viable product, but you also need something that's functioning and showing potential in the actual marketplace. So, and that's usually the difference between going through your initial seed funding rounds versus your scaling up round, is just where are you at in that cycle. But yeah, you can be looking at between 500 upwards of a couple $1 million of investment that you need if you're wanting to go and attack the marketplace.
Wow. You glazed over it, but could you dig deeper in the benefit corporation and what that is?
Yeah, so the Eligible Business Corporation is a BC government-funded initiative that allows people to invest in startup companies using either straight-up investment, RSPs, tax-free saving accounts, and then that investor gets 30% of their investment back in the first year, which really helps mitigate the risk of investing in a high-risk startup. Again, in order to be eligible for that, 80% of your operation or cash flow has to be in Canada. 80% of your operation ownership also has to be in Canada. But it is a very beneficial, a lot of the funds, like if you're going into Vancouver and you're trying to fund through a number of the different groups out there that do it, they require that. If you don't have it, you will not get any money.
And from the individual, do they have to be a high net worth person, like with a lot of liquid assets? Like,
Yeah. So
excluding everybody in the
Well,
room,
this one
including
isn't-
myself.
this one isn't necessarily tied to that program. This is
Okay.
just in general.
Got it.
If you're going to invest in a tech startup in BC, we have what's called securities laws that are very, very tight. So if you're going to invest in a company, regardless if they have the Eligible Business Corporation, you need to have a couple $1 million of assets. You need to make, if you're single, I think it's $200,000 a year in each of the last 2 years. If you're married, it's $300,000. And those are the barriers of entry just to be able to find an investment. So if there's people in the audience that are like, hey, I'd love to invest in Greenhouse Games. Well, did you make 200 grand last year? Have I known you for 5 to 10 years? And if the answer is no, sorry, you're not allowed to invest. The government will not let you.
So these are some of the barriers that you were hitting, even if you did have interest from Chilliwack, right?
Yeah, or funds or groups. You have to meet all the boxes. And over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been a real education process, because you'd think anyone can invest. It's up to them. But no, the government protects people.
And you were also talking about a fast track to going public. And is that part of the same structure, or?
Yeah, it's another opportunity. One of the things I've learned through going into Vancouver looking for funding is that the Vancouver area specifically has a pretty poor reputation for investments because a lot of people want to put money in and then take it out right away, which devalues the company and then obviously creates issues for the remaining shareholders. So in this area, a lot of investors, especially if you're looking for $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, they want to know how they're going to get their money out sooner rather than later. And investing into a private company is always very risky. And you could have all of your investment tied up for 5, 10 years, and you have no recourse, no way whatsoever to get your money out. So by going the public route, that allows people to publicly trade stock, which then gives investors a lot more confidence that if they want to pull their money out, that they can.
So with this recent traction, and it sounds like things are going really well, has your notion of working and living and building a tech startup in Chilliwack soured, or do you still think it's there?
I still think it's here. Again, I've worked in Kelowna, where, again, it's even farther away from Vancouver. I worked in Malta, where, we had to import every single person there. And even in Colorado, pretty much most hires that we had came from other states or other countries. So I see no difference why it can't be here. Again, the trick is just where's your investment coming from? Unless you're a profitable company, you're at this stage, as far as I can tell, you need to go into Vancouver. You need to do all the networking events. You need to talk to all the funds. There's all kinds of different pitch nights out there. There's Vantech. There's Volition pitch nights. There's UBC sponsored pitch nights, SFU. Like, there's all kinds of things. But if you want to raise funds,
so as a startup founder with an idea, this sounds pretty daunting. Like, how do you get educating yourself to a level where you think you can have these conversations and not feel like all of a sudden all the equity that you've built is going to be gone? And is it like, what does it take?
well, after 3 or 4 years of going into Vancouver and learning about this, I'd say I'm still not there. So if you have the answer to that, let me know. But it's just sheer determination. I don't know how many people that I've run into and they're like, oh, wow, you're still doing this after so many years? We thought that you would have quit like 3 years ago. And it's just sheer determination, stubbornness, and belief in what you're building is going to hit it in the marketplace. But if you're not willing to be poor and sacrifice literally everything along the way, then maybe you should go work for someone else.
Got it. I'm going to steal a question from Mel because I know he's going to ask it after. When you're not fully consumed in this startup grind, what do you enjoy? What are you doing? Like, do you have free time?
I don't have free time or money. So when I'm not working, I'm worrying about what I should be working on to make sure that I get the next funding that I need. I like to cook. I've got my family at home. We do lots. Luckily, my family's got a number of vacation properties around BC that I can go to without paying money. But yeah, I'm poor.
But the upside is right there. It's coming.
Oh yeah. For 3 years now in a row, next month is the month.
Yeah.
Every month. Next month, that's the month.
Well, you got to believe that, right?
Well, next month, though, actually is the month.
Exactly.
And I believe that.
And so do I. Well, let's turn it over to the audience for questions. Michael's got a mic here.
Thanks for sharing. I'm sure this may come up in the after credits anyways, but I'll pop the question just in case. Is there any way someone could have like 24 hours worth of education in the gaming industry sometime near future in Chilliwack?
Oh, it's funny you mentioned Colin. As a co-organizer of Game Jam next month, yes, there is.
Wait a second, what's happening here?
Is this a paid?
So next month we're organizing a game jam, which is basically this crazy competition where people sign up in over 24 hours. They try to create a game. We're going to be hosting this event on October 18th and 19th at the Downtown Business Center, and anyone that's interested and crazy enough to show up and give it a try, we welcome you to show up and register. I believe the registration's just gone live in the last week or so, and talk to Colin. Nice question.
Awesome, and yes, it will come up in the after credits. So is it truly like this 24 hours? You have to conceive, build a team and build, or can you come with something
Nope,
sort of half-baked?
nothing prepared.
Wow.
We want to make an evil. It is kind of evil. An even playing field for everyone so that people can't show up with projects. It is, at the end of the day, it's our first kind of test to see if these type of events will be successful in Chilliwack, and if so, we're hopeful to keep doing more of them, and we're very hopeful to have sponsors from some of the larger gaming companies.
Excellent.
And we're even bringing out mentors, tech mentors, so people will, if they don't know exactly what they're doing, there'll be people around that can help, but it's encouraged to have some level of knowledge coming in.
Do we have a question from Not a Plant?
So when you came back and you started to try to find investors here, were you finding that there weren't many government programs to promote starting a business, or was it just that you weren't even aware of them, or were they very hard to even find anything out to try to get government involvement or tax benefits or anything like that?
A bit of everything, to be honest. Given that when I came back, my development studio was in Europe, that closed a ton of doors from any kind of BC or even Canadian programs. A lot of the programs for tech startups seem to be geared at getting you interns and people to help, which is great, but if your development team is in a different continent, like, they could come hang out at my house, but that probably wouldn't be very beneficial. And then also, it's really hard to find different government programs that are out there that you can actually tangibly apply for. There is a $100 million tech fund that was announced 2 or 3 years ago, and we've spent 2 or 3 years trying to find the contact information of the person just to talk to them. So there's a lot of challenges out there for sure. I find, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but the US market for tech incubations and startups is a lot different because they allow private companies to benefit in that process, whereas in Canada, it's pretty much, for the most part, the government that regulates it, which is, in my opinion, a little bit backwards. And because of that, startups need to be led by the entrepreneur, not the government. If you're waiting for the government to do anything, then you'll wait 3 years just for the thing to change. But it's really hard to get visibility into what you can apply for and all the different programs and lining those up and then going through all the hoops and understanding the requirements up front. I found more often than not, until you go through the process, you don't know what the requirements are, even though they list some of the requirements up front. So it can be a really frustrating process if you're relying on the government programs to help you get funded.
Just to follow up to that, do you think that now at the end of 2019, is it easier, or are there more programs available for government, or do you think it's less, or it's still too hidden?
I don't think a ton has changed from the government perspective, but there's a number of groups out there now, whether it's Accelerator, whether it's entrepreneurship groups in Vancouver, whether it's VanTech in Vancouver. There's a lot of other groups that if you go out there and find them, they've got a ton of resources to help you. But it's up to you as an entrepreneur to commit the time to go out there, not for 1 night, not 2 nights, not 3 nights, but to show up and build relationships. If you're making a startup, it's all about networking and building relationships with people over, unfortunately, longer periods of time. If you're going into Vancouver and expecting to get a $500,000 or $1 million check from an investor, the odds of that are very, very, very low at best. But what increases those are just, again, every time you meet that same investor, every time you go and pitch at that same group, slowly they give you more and more time and help promote you a little bit more. So there's no tricks. It's just time invested.
Kalvin,
Dave.
we've known each other for a while now. So the big question, what's your end game?
My end game for my studio is to get bought out by a larger corporation. But more so than that, I'm a creative product guy at heart, so I want to build really cool games that show they do really well in the marketplace. And if I do that well, I believe that money and funding will follow it. But that's my main motivation. I spent, about 12 years in corporate life, And I want to prove that I can make it on my own, and I want to prove that the ideas that I have the potential to be mass market ideas.
So you want to continue to do what you love to do and make money doing it.
Yeah. Step one is to continue doing it because I don't have to do it by making revenue, and then after that, yeah. I think about this all the time. I'll be really frustrated with funding, or I'll be really burnt out from work, and what do? I go sit on the couch and I go play mobile games, and I'm like, okay.
What's on your phone right now?
Tons of different mobile games. So I play Clash Royale a ton. I play a lot of different skateboarding, snowboarding games, different battle games, SimCity-like games, a lot of very city builder-like games, because that's kind of my focus right now. But I also play a lot of arcade games, lots of Twitch-based games, and currently I'm reviewing a number of games for either our Pocket Pinata group or some of the publishers that I work for. So, yeah, just tons of games, playing games all the time.
Are you an iPhone guy, a Samsung guy?
I'm an iPhone guy. To
Okay.
be honest, I've been on Apple for about 15 years now, and I don't even own an Android. I've never owned an Android. I should own an Android.
I'm sure somebody involved in
Well,
your
because
games
one of
owns
my
an
many
Android.
tasks, like just earlier today, when you're a startup founder, not only do I do customer service, but I also do quality assurance.
Okay.
And they're like, does the Android build work? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. I don't have an Android device. And they're like, well, next time you're in the office, you better pick one up.
We've got a question back here.
What is your Clash Royale go-to deck?
Oh, were we going there? So I like the Royal Giant. I like a big fat tank. I like my Witch card, which is kind of like an air and ground unit. It's really good. I like my Wizard, which is kind of like a fireball shooting guy. He's really powerful but weak. Yeah, there's 6 or 7 cards in the deck. I like freezing people, so when I'm busy fighting them, I can just prevent them from doing anything. And then a bunch of cheap cards, just so when they attack me, because for the most part, my cards are really expensive. I have something to defend with. But I'm up there now. I'm like around, I think I've capped out around 5,600 in that game, which is like one of the top 4 leagues. I've only been playing, though, for like 7 years.
You guys may not be able to see it, but his pupils actually did double the size when he was talking about that. Let's finish with a question from Mel, our resident Yoda.
Well, thank you, Tim. Kalvin, fascinating tonight to hear your story. My wife is Korean. I spend maybe a month every year in Korea. I have she has a 15-year-old niece that somehow made, I think, close to $10,000 gaming last year. She's a junior member of some sort of team of some sort. How is the gaming culture different over there in terms of development of games, the support of games, the consumption of games? How is it different in Korea or Asia in general?
Well, Asia is essentially the inventor of free-to-play games, specifically Korea and China. So, I mean, in this day and age, it's not significantly different to North America, but 10 years ago, they're basically 10 years ahead of the curve. So they're used to free-to-play games. They're used to purchasing on their mobile device, because they've been making purchases on their mobile devices for about probably 15, 20 years now. But we've made up a lot of ground in that regard. So outside of that, their esports competitions are obviously a little bit more funded, and they have larger prize money, but there's a huge initiative right now across North America for esports, which is basically professional gaming, if you want to make a lot of money just playing games. Again, they're about 10 years ahead. The really interesting thing from a development or creative standpoint in Asia compared to North America is they like a lot deeper games that are harder to play. They like to showcase the frustration that other players go through, and to say, like, I'm the only one that figured it out, where us players in North America, we're like, that's a little difficult. I'll just try something else, right? But that's the main difference, is they're really they really like the challenge of a game. They like the competition aspects, and they're about 10 years ahead of us.
Well, let's hear it for Kalvin.